can I make a suggestion? It is the end of the day, and we want to actually have an intimate conversation. We want to have a proper conversation, the true sense of the word. So I am going to ask everybody sitting in this room, you know what? Come join us. Really. We're not allowed to come down to you because they're filming this, but we want you to come to us. Awesome. Isn't this better? Isn't this so much better? Okay.
That's coming next.
We're going to sing Kumbaya. We are.
You know, normally this room is for magic shows, and so that's coming in just a little bit.
You're going to show us some magic.
Yes, we are.
Okay. So the next wave of artificial intelligence, a quantum-inspired approach. So we have 20 minutes, give or take. You all know who Jack is, and if you don't know who Jack is, you're about to find out. But also you can get on your FII website. CEO of SandboxAQ. Some of you will have seen him earlier, and that got me really energized for this conversation, bringing together AI and quantum technology. And I was sitting down with, I think, your chief of staff earlier, who was explaining the concept to me. And so I'm going to start by saying, okay, give us the 101 of what SandboxAQ does that is so different, and pepper into there some real-world examples. So educate us.
Well, first, it's great to be here, and AI has already made such a big splash, and the good news is people are very curious and they want to know what's happening. But what's about to come, and starting literally last year, this year, is much more profound than what we've seen in the last few years. Language models, wonderful tools, everyone is using them, everyone should be using them. I'm not sure students should be using them every day for all their homework, but there's a lot of usage of language models everywhere. But the next wave of AI that's now upon us, that SandboxAQ is involved in, others are involved in around the world, is to take AI into the impact areas of our lives. When we think about medical areas, Dan Arbus is here. He and I have had long chats for years about how do we revolutionize our healthcare system, our medical system. Language models can help in terms of summarizing scientific literature, medical literature. They can help perhaps in looking at electronic medical records, but ultimately we have to make a medicine. We have to do a diagnostic to understand how that person is doing, and that means a brain scan or an EKG or new kinds of scans. And those are really, you don't really want an AI that's a large language model trained on Reddit and cat pictures to give you your diagnosis. I wouldn't really want to build on that. Or you really don't want them to actually create a drug either. Drugs really have to be created with a deep understanding of what the chemistry is of our bodies, what the target is, and where we need to take this. And this is where, to your question about bringing quantum in, Joe is here from one of the best quantum companies. Shout out a bit about your company, Joe. Name of company. Horizon Quantum Computing, great company. And so there are companies out there like Joe's, like many others, that are building the quantum hardware, and that's progressing. You just heard a big announcement from Microsoft recently. Google had an announcement with the Willow chip. It's very exciting what's happening there. But as that happens, the GPUs, the chips we have today from NVIDIA, from other companies, we've been able to have a breakthrough in bringing the quantum equations onto those chips and being able to do those calculations of how would a drug impact your body. Let's do, for a sense, a virtual human trial billions of times before we take it to the first human. We know the dismal numbers in biopharma today, taking on average 10 years to develop a compound before the first clinical trial. We know the failure rates in clinical trials. And anyone want to hear a guess? What are the failure rates in clinical trials today? I'll start the bidding at 20% failure. Any other bids?
99.
80%, 90, yes, 80 to 95% failure rates. We can do better. People say, Xenia, let's have an AI that's as good as humans. No, let's not do that. We need an AI that's much better than humans than doing this.
Okay, so you've given us a pharmaceutical example of where it can change the concept. We've got smart people in the room, right?
Very smart.
We've got some smart people in the room. So spend 2 minutes explaining to us what differentiates quantum from the AI that we know and love, notwithstanding the conversation we were just in a moment ago. So just give us the science 101.
The science is this. The world that we know, the world of billiard balls, the world of moving our hands around here is a Newtonian world. It's a world that Isaac Newton helped us a lot with 300 years ago. We can send rockets to the moon with Newtonian physics. Great stuff, very useful stuff. But it turns out that the actual universe, down to the electrons, doesn't work with Newtonian physics. And we needed a new kind of physics. And the year 1900 happened to be that year that Max Planck and others started this revolution. So from 1900 to 1926, 35 people worked on this. 24 of them got Nobel Prizes. They're in a picture in the Solvay conference in Belgium. And they deserve that because they realize that there's a new dynamics, a new set of equations that helps us understand if I want to have a battery chemistry that is not today's lithium ion, but a new one, how do those ions interact with each other? That is not billiard balls. That is a new kind of science, a quantum science. The good news is we have those equations. And the bad news is until 2 years ago, we didn't have the compute on Earth to actually use those equations at scale. That's what's different now.
Okay, so you correct me if I'm wrong. So Joe, who I met last fall, he's creating the hardware.
That's right.
Right? And you're creating the
software.
Okay. And so you two, it's a marriage of, I can see him kind of going, whoa, no, that's not how I see it. Okay.
Yes.
So Joe does hardware. Wait a sec. Joe does hardware and software. You only do software. Should Joe be sitting up here? Okay. So transport yourself 10 years from now. Give us 2 or 3 examples. And by the way, I am going to let you guys ask questions. Go on.
Yeah.
No, we want you in. Okay. Wait a sec. We got a mic coming your way.
What you just talked about, Jack, was a perfect example of how. But the one piece that's missing that I think would be very helpful for everybody to hear is what. It is about the data. Large language model data is only as good as what you find on the internet. Some is true, some isn't true. That's not going to work for discovery of drugs and diagnostics in the medical context or really in any intelligent context. So large language model AI is just 3-dimensional Wikipedia and Google together. It's kind of like, call it Yandex or something, okay? The what is the data, and what you're talking about is the how the data will be computed, will be digested. So the main thing for everybody to understand is you have to start with high quality data that comes from a different source.
This is great, Dan.
Is he your media guy?
No, he's not, but
He should be your media guy.
He's a smart guy.
Yeah. So I
let
want you
me-
to respond to that, but I
Yeah.
want you to respond to it by also saying, in a decade, with that data, that
Yeah.
quantum created data or quantum delivered data, here are 3 practical examples of what is going to be different a decade from now in terms of our everyday life because of this.
So I'll bring the two together. Dan is absolutely correct. In the world of large language models, we'll come to, yes. In the world of large language models, the data set is the World Wide Web, right? So Tim Berners-Lee, who did a great thing by creating the web, essentially created the largest training set in the world, the largest training set of data, and people use that to train large language models. What we realized at Sandbox is that would actually be the last kind of data you want to use to do these kinds of applications we're talking about here, biopharma, energy, materials, our new kinds of clothing, things like that. And here, we don't use any data from the internet, none whatsoever. In fact, 80% of the data we use, we generate from the equations themselves. That's why it's so pristine. It's pristine because we take a system of this molecule, this battery chemistry, this new kind of solar panel, things like that. And we say, how can we use the equations that we know, given to us 100 years ago by Schrodinger, by Heisenberg, by Niels Bohr, and others, and how can we apply them just changing one parameter billions of times to create a combinatorial menu, essentially, and then test each one of those in silico on a chip before they're tested in the real world. So this is a new kind of way. We don't use any data from the internet. We're making synthetic data, generative data, if you want to say gen data instead of gen AI, and we're training models on those. And what neural networks are really good at, and again, in our case, we're not so much using transformers. People have heard about the transformer model being the language model. That's great for language, but we use other kinds of architectures of neural networks trained on this synthetic data, data coming from the equations themselves, and we then optimize for the goal. The goal might be a drug that is both efficacious but also not toxic, and also affordable, and shelf-stable, and this and that. And that's what neural networks are actually really good at, is that kind of optimization.
Okay,
So 10 years from
now.
now, 10 years
Yes.
from now, what do we see the world as? We must, if we're going to handle the issues of 8, 9 billion people, we must have a biopharma sector that is just 1 to 2 years of prep of a drug, and then a clinical trial system that is sped up, and has a 85% success rate, not 85% failure rate. We must find energy sources with this kind of novel material design that are novel in terms of the battery storage that we need for all kinds of energy sources. We must lightweight the vehicles. I just came from Detroit on Monday. We presented in front of the large automakers at their request, asking us to lightweight the vehicle. Every pound you take off the weight of a car is a more efficient car. Same thing for Boeing and Airbus. Same thing for space company, Elon's company, Jeff Bezos' company. If we can make it lighter weight to lift, less fuel, more payload, we can do the things faster in space. So lightweighting materials is going to be the order of the day. We're going to have novel materials. Agriculture will be completely changed in 10 years with this technology. And in addition to the automation, you're going to hear from robotics. Dion did a great job on the robotics side, talking about robots. Agriculture will be that. In 10 to 15 years' time, we believe that both software AI and embodied AI, robotics, will bring down the cost. Yes, a deflationary major trend of clothing, of food, of housing, construction. We're looking at 40, 50% decrease in cost in the 10 to 15 year time frame. So I know some people are very worried, Xenia, about inflation in the near term, but let me say that to the economists listening to this here in the room and on video, we encourage you to think about the deflationary impact that AI is going to have.
I don't even know where to start with that image, but I do want to. I want to flesh out that image. But there was a question over
We
here.
have a couple of
there's
comments
a
and
question over here.
questions.
So,
Yes.
but 3 questions. We're gonna. If we
I think
if
we have a
can.
mic.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3.
Thank you so much. I heard
Your name,
you talk.
please, your name.
Oh, yes, sorry. My name is Swati Chaturvedi. I'm from San Francisco. I'm an investor there. Good to meet you. My question is, I heard your talk earlier also, and there was also some drug development there. So let's take that example. Much of the research today is hypothesis-driven research, right? So scientists think of an idea, they test it, experiments, et cetera, et cetera. That data is in fact published. It's peer-reviewed, it's published, and it's valuable information. I'd love your thoughts on that. But separately, coming to what the point that you were making, are you saying that you're developing new hypotheses? What is the point of those? So you are. Okay, I just love your, if you could elaborate a little bit on that so I could understand how those equations are playing into the situation here. Thank you.
Great. Okay, hold the question. We'll do it. Andres,
Hey, Jack. Great seeing you again.
introduce yourself, please. Introduce yourself.
Oh, Andros Forgax with Starlight Ventures, investing in frontier technologies, including in the materials space and biotech. So what you're describing here is you have the ability to really investigate a much larger design space in a very high throughput way in silico, approximating real-world physics. And the amount of hits you must come up with is massive. How do you then have a high throughput way, or a correspondingly high throughput way, of testing the output that you get in silico in vivo, in the real world, and then actually having experimental data that allows you to validate or not, right, the hits that you come up with?
Great question. And they're very complementary to the first question. Good, we'll hit both of those. And now for something completely different. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm the final one. So, Tamer Said, FI Institute CFO. My question was about, you just spoke about the difference between quantum computing and AI. So, do you think quantum computing serves as a challenge or disruption to the current AI models, or will it serve as an accelerator to it?
Great question. Great question. So,
Can I add another one?
Please.
Because you're smart, you can hold all of this.
see, it is a magic show. See?
What's the curve that we're talking about? In the session earlier, we were talking about a S curve of change. We think in linear terms. Most of us, I suspect you don't think in linear terms, but most of us think in linear terms. And we were talking about an S curve of change. But is that vision for the future, is it S curve? Is it exponential? Is it logarithmic? Like, how fast is this happening?
Great. So let's start with hypothesis-driven and then move to Andres' question, because those two come together. What we're doing here is both things. Very often, what takes the longest in biopharma development is to develop the hypothesis of what the target is going to be. So before we get to the drugging that target, one needs a target. An example would be, people may know the drug Keytruda. Keytruda comes from Merck. There's some other competitors to it. Keytruda brings in $27 billion a year from Merck. It's a immunotherapy, a checkpoint inhibitor, one that is saving millions and millions of people's lives. And the target for that is the PD-1 receptor. It's a receptor on a T cell, an immune cell, and that receptor is something that tumors can use to shut down the T cell, and so it does not attack the tumor. And when you take Keytruda, you're blocking up that receptor with an antibody, actually a synthetic one that we made, humans made, rather than the body makes, and we prevent the tumor from shutting down the T cell. The T cell now is like a Roman guard coming into the fight and kills the tumor, and literally millions of people have been saved in this way. So how did we come up with that PD-1 target? Before that, we had another target, CTLA-4, it turns out, and that one was a fine drug, but massive toxic side effects, and not really a great one. We call that IPI for short. And so this hypothesis-driven sense of how do we find the target in the first place, that is now in the province, that is tractable now. That was not 5-10 years ago in terms of the kind of machine learning that we had before, because we're able to look through the mechanisms of action, the actual way that a drug would hit that particular T cell or tumor or parts of the brain for neurodegen disease. We can develop hypotheses, and we can run through thousands of hypotheses rather than the typical situation which you alluded to, which is one hypothesis, check it out, write a paper, get it published, and then move on. And that is just not obviously cutting it. We need to now move to doing this in parallel, and that's what's beginning to happen just in the last 24, 36 months. And now we come to Andres' point in terms of how do we take what is in silico in the computer and talk about in vivo. And it could be in the biopharma area, but it could also be, by the way, in the material science area. When we were at the automaker just on Monday, one of the questions was, how do we, yes, we love the fact, they said, that you're looking at a much bigger design space of materials, of alloys, of different combinations, maybe even carbon composites, carbon fibers. If people are seeing an F1 car, how many people have been to the F1 races, right? When you see that F1 zip around, that car is mainly made of carbon, right? Carbon composites are light, but super strong. So why isn't Stellantis and GM and Ford and Daimler and BMW using carbon fiber? The answer is it's really expensive, massively expensive today, but doesn't have to be so. And so in silico techniques are teaching us that we can possibly make carbon fiber at great volume and very, very low price. And so what we do is we use a big palette of design space, sometimes millions, hundreds of millions, to sometimes billions of possibilities, but we narrow it down, Andres, to usually 3 to 5 that we actually take into a lab and synthesize in a lab, be it a metallurgy lab in Michigan or be it a biopharma lab. Exactly. And this is a great point. There's something called high throughput screening. And people may have heard this term. It means that there's a robot that it's a big like bread box you can imagine in a biotech lab. And I started my career at NIH, and we have many of those over there. And it's able to synthesize new combinations of that drug, slightly different versions of that drug. But the total throughput is about 5,000 to 6,000 drugs per week. Sounds like a lot, but until you realize that we need to look at 100 million versions of it, that's not that much. And so we really limit the number that we're actually going to synthesize in the real world, but we always then iterate back into the in silico. So think of it as an iterative loop of we simulate in the silico world, and then we test in the real world, come back to the silicon world, and then we iterate in that manner. So that's one way we do that.
Quickly, I'm going to say, go
Yes.
to this gent's question.
Yeah. Now, AI and quantum.
'Cause we're
So
running out
thanks
of
for that question. AI and quantum will work together. So first of all, on the hardware level, today everyone knows the GPUs, the NVIDIA, AMD, many other companies. We had Tenstorrent on the stage earlier here today, another novel idea of looking at this. Cerebras is another chip company you may have heard of that is looking at novel versions of GPUs. So we have the GPU world. And then we have the QPU world, the quantum processing unit world. And there's about 30 very serious companies that are the startups or large companies that are building quantum hardware. And this will accelerate over the next 5-6 years. You're going to see a cadence of announcements. Every 3 to 6 months, there'll be like some interesting announcement. That's my prediction to you. And in about 5 to 7 years, you're going to see scaled, fault-tolerant quantum hardware. This is synergistic with AI. First of all, you can generate fascinating data with quantum hardware that you can't do in other ways. Number two, there are ways, think about quantum hardware as a subroutine so that the GPU is running the main program, and then subroutines out to a quantum piece of hardware that says, hello, quantum hardware, you can do this one calculation 1 billion times faster than we can over here on the GPU side. Please do that, and please return me the result. It returns the result, and we move on with our calculation. So this CPU, GPU, QPU hybrid mesh is where the cloud is going. 99% of quantum will be used on the cloud. A handful of customers will want it on site, on-prem, but it's going to be a very, very interesting future. We're still a number of years away, but it's coming sooner. Now, go ahead.
Well, so I'm going to say, so I'm being cut off. I, for one, could literally sit here for the next, I don't know how many hours talking about this, but I'm going to answer my own question listening to you as a closer and say, this is exponential. This is logarithmic. We're talking this. We're not talking this anymore, right?
If I could just,
Yeah,
add
go
one
on.
thing to that, which is this year, 2025, is the year where we begin compounding AI, right? AI that can begin to write good enough software that is additive, that is contributing to the next AI. In the last few years, code has been written, but not the greatest code in the world. This year, my prediction, other people have predicted that it's getting good enough to start compounding. When you think about the era of compounding AI, AI writing AI, AI working with humans to advance this, not just in writing essays for college students, not just in summarizing documents, but now in the real world, the drugs that we need, the diagnostics we need, new kinds of rockets to get us up into space, new kind of satellites, things like that for communications. This now really impacts our world. In a world in really, I think, looks very, very differently. And the concern I want to leave you with, share you with as a call to action, is that right now there's only 4 countries that have 90% of this kind of AI. 90% of the AI IP, the talent, the companies exist in only 4 countries. My hope, US, China, France, UK, right? Israel is coming up now. If they get back to some good peace there, I think it will come up even faster. In the Gulf region, we've seen Saudi lean in with KAUST. We've seen UAE lean in with MBZ UAI and Falcon. So we're beginning to see some shoots of excitement there in the Gulf region. But can we go beyond these 7 or so countries? Can we engage people from around the world? This is what has not happened yet. I'm concerned about it. Others are concerned about it. My call to action to you today is, how can we partner to widen the berth of how we get this AI technology up?
So many questions. We didn't talk about DeepSeek. I wanted to kind of bring up DeepSeek. We don't have time, but you're around,
Yes.
right? So
around for another 10 minutes. We'll hang out right here in
Exactly,
the
and
coffee
fairly
clutch.
distinguishable with the hat. And I don't know about you, I want a hat. I'm a little bit of a groupie at this point. Thank you so much. This was absolutely fascinating. Will
Great.
you join me in thanking Jack? Jack, real
Thank you,
pleasure.
Xenia. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, folks want to stick around. We'll answer a few more questions here.